Deep in the heart of the woods, a hunter's unexpected meeting with a bear took a surprising turn. Initially gripped by fear, the hunter soon realized that the bear was not a threat, but instead desperately seeking his help. What happened next was truly astonishing. In the heart of the unforgiving woods, a solitary hunter named Arthur found himself in a mysterious and unsettling encounter. His senses heightened, he listened to terrifying sounds echoing through the forest, cries that seemed both inhuman and desperate. Despite the warning signs, curiosity overcame fear, propelling him forward. With each careful step, he drew closer to the source of the noises until he stumbled upon a scene that surpassed mere terror. A bear lay before him in a clearing, not only trapped in a snare but tied with chains and barbed wire beyond recognition. Every movement caused the bear to cry out in pain. The hunter's pulse quickened as he stood face to face with the creature. On any other day, he would have been thrilled to have the opportunity to hunt a bear. But what he was witnessing wasn't hunting. It was pure torture. The bear was pleading for help. The hunter set aside his initial apprehension, ignoring the lingering fear. He carefully approached the distressed bear. Its labored breaths and anguished growls intensified as the hunter carefully surveyed the complex web of snares, chains, and barbed wire entangling the creature. It became evident that an act of kindness would not be enough. He would need to dismantle the gruesome trap from the ground up, which could take hours. As he attempted to draw nearer, the bear lashed out with a powerful swipe, a desperate attempt to protect itself from what it perceived as another threat. Then, Arthur did something shocking. He lowered his hunting gear and weapons, the only defenses he had, and placed them on the ground. The act of disarming himself served as a kind gesture, a promise that he meant no harm. The bear gradually calmed. The poor creature had met enough hunters during its life to understand that they were only dangerous if they held items in their hands, and this human's hands were now empty. Its eyes now held a glimmer of recognition, a silent acknowledgement of the connection forming between them. But this didn't change the fact that Arthur was putting himself in danger. Any sane person would refuse to get this close to such a large, unpredictable beast, and yet he couldn't seem to resist. The man who had taken up hunting as a pastime was now staring into the eyes of a creature that bore the scars of his sport, and it left him heartbroken. Working methodically, the hunter cut through the snare first. Each strand resisted, unwilling to release its grip. The air was heavy with the scent of fear and the metallic tang of blood that stained the bear's fur. Every movement carried the weight of uncertainty and risk, but one by one, the chains clattered as they fell away. Arthur then moved on to the barbed wire. Upon closer inspection, it appeared that the wire had begun digging into the bear's flesh. The animal's cries intensified as Arthur painstakingly worked on removing each twisted strand. He could feel the bear's muscles tense with each tug and delicately move through the wire, careful not to cause any further harm. The realization of the responsibility he had taken upon himself settled in, yet he could not bring himself to regret the decision. Finally, the last piece of barbed wire was removed, and the bear, now free from its painful restraints, slumped to the ground. As Arthur stepped back, sadness washed over him as he bore witness to the full extent of the bear's wounds. Its fur was marred by deep gashes, punctures where the barbed wire had bitten into its flesh, and the bear's once powerful and untamed limbs were bruised, swollen, and weakened. It was a stark contradiction to the wilderness that Arthur had been romanticizing. Each cut he made had been a painful realization, exposing both the brutality of the traps and the impact of his actions. The thrill of the chase, the satisfaction of a successful hunt. All of it now seemed trivial in comparison to the living, breathing consequences before Arthur. Now kneeling beside the bear, he extended a hand, hesitant and filled with shame. "I'm sorry this happened to you," were the only words he could offer. The creature, though weary and exhausted, responded by melting into Arthur's touch. It was likely the only kindness it had been shown in a very, very long time. It took a few minutes before the bear was ready to move. Arthur observed the animal struggle to rise but waited patiently. He wasn't going to leave it behind to fend for itself because other hunters would eventually come across the creature and not be as forgiving as him. That was if the wild didn't get to the bear first. To his surprise, the bear trusted Arthur and began to follow him back through the woods. As they approached his secluded cabin, Arthur reached for his phone and dialed the number of a local wildlife clinic, pleading for urgent assistance. The clinic quickly dispatched a team to his location to assess the bear's condition. When the wildlife rescue team arrived, they immediately tranquilized the bear and carefully examined it. The team determined that it had likely been trapped in that agonizing manner for days, left to endure hunger, pain, and isolation. Infection had set in, and stitches were deemed necessary to prevent further complications. Without immediate intervention, there was a high probability that the bear could lose a limb. Together, they carefully loaded the bear onto a specialized transport vehicle and arrived at the clinic 30 minutes later. Their veterinarians and wildlife experts collaborated to provide the bear with the care it desperately needed. The wounds were cleaned, antibiotics administered, and stitches applied with painstaking precision to close the gaping injuries. To Arthur's dismay, after completing their work, the wildlife experts revealed an unsettling truth. The bear they suspected was not an isolated victim. Over the past few weeks, there had been several reports coming in of other wildlife who had similar, if not identical, injuries. These were acts of cruelty likely being inflicted by the same person, an individual who enjoyed causing harm. The revelation that other animals had been subjected to the same fate infuriated Arthur. The anger that welled up within him fueled the determination not only to save this bear but also to actively seek justice for the crimes committed against innocent wildlife. The man who had entered the woods as a hunter emerged as a healer, and in that moment, he promised to never let such atrocities go unchecked again. In the following days, the bear remained heavily sedated and under close observation at the clinic. Arthur, now an unexpected advocate, visited regularly. He was told that without his timely intervention, the bear likely wouldn't have made it another 24 hours. He found comfort in the idea that he had helped to get the beast into recovery, but still, his guilt was not entirely resolved. As the bear gradually regained strength, the clinic staff discussed the possibility of releasing it back into the wild once it made a full recovery. But Arthur rejected this idea, stating that there was no point in releasing the bear when someone was still terrorizing its home. The poor creature would likely fall into another trap, which meant all of this treatment would be for nothing. While the staff agreed it was out of their hands, they simply did not have the space or resources to house the bear for more than a few days. Without a second thought, Arthur embarked on a race against time to find the perpetrator before the bear's release. Armed with the evidence gathered by the clinic, he took his findings to the police, animal control, and even his local hunting community. The hunting community, appalled by the malicious acts, unanimously agreed to halt their hunting activities for a period of time. They pledged to report any suspicious activity in the forest, hoping to narrow down the search for the criminal. In the meantime, law enforcement officials would investigate the reported incidents and collaborate with animal control to coordinate their efforts. They assured Arthur that every possible measure within their authority would be taken to apprehend the perpetrator and put an end to the spree of cruelty. Word spread like wildfire, and pressure began to mount against the local government to intervene and address the escalating crisis. However, the responsibility seemed to fall solely on Arthur's shoulders. He set up surveillance cameras in the most popular hunting spots of the forest. But as days turned into nights, the footage yielded nothing. His frustration grew. It seemed as though the tormentor had vanished into the shadows and left no trace behind. One fateful night, Arthur was abruptly awakened by a rustling sound outside his window. His senses heightened, he peered into the darkness and caught sight of a figure disappearing into the trees. Adrenaline surged through his veins as he realized that this might be the break he had been waiting for. Without a moment to waste, he grabbed his flashlight and followed the fleeting silhouette into the heart of the woods, determined to unmask the antagonist and put an end to the reign of terror consuming his town. The figure ahead moved with an almost supernatural grace, disappearing and reappearing like a phantom. Suddenly, the rustling sound ceased, and an eerie silence settled over the forest. The figure had vanished, leaving Arthur standing alone in the midst of towering trees. It was then that a faint glow caught Arthur's attention. In the clearing ahead, he discovered a makeshift campsite illuminated by the soft light of a lantern. The remnants of a recently extinguished fire still smoldered, and the lingering scent of burnt wood hung in the air. As Arthur approached, he noticed discarded tools, a set of wire cutters, a coil of barbed wire, a toolkit that mirrored what was used to cause the animal's injuries. His heart raced as he looked around the campsite, realizing he was close to finding the person responsible. Arthur took out his phone and snapped pictures of the campsite as evidence, making sure to capture every detail. As he was about to leave, he heard a noise and quickly hid in the dark. A man in dark clothing approached the campfire, unaware of Arthur's presence. Arthur waited for the man to sit down before surprising him and tackling him to the ground. Despite a brief struggle, Arthur managed to restrain the man and called the police. With Arthur's help, the authorities disarmed any remaining traps set by the criminal, ensuring no more animals would be harmed. As the sun rose, casting a gentle light over the once tormented woods, Arthur witnessed the captured perpetrator facing justice. The bear and other wildlife victims were released back into the wild, restoring life to the forest. The criminal received a severe sentence of 35 years for 5 counts of animal cruelty. The community united to prevent future atrocities, leading to new legislation and a return to normalcy. Arthur found peace as a guardian of the woods, symbolizing a new dawn of compassion and justice. Imagine yourself in Arthur's shoes, confronted with a crucial decision. Do you choose the path of compassion or turn a blind eye? What would you decide, and why? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Thank you.